we not for sale. We not for sale.
Cut it out.
And we can't be stopped. What's up, people?
What's up?
Welcome to the podcast. We not for sale.
We not for sale.
We're in the house again.
Yeah, but I do.
We really hope y'all digged our first episode. This is our second episode right here. We hope y'all digged that first episode. We're getting a lot of positive feedback from it. So people are actually digging it. Talked a lot about vaccines. So if you didn't check it out, hit the rewind button, go to episode 1, then come back to episode 2 and check us out. Skrill, where can they check us out?
Oh, man, we all over the place right now. And I think the first place I would go is iTunes. Most users know iTunes pretty well. You can go to One Podcast. You can go to Spreaker.com, Rationale. There are a million affiliate podcast organizations out there. But
for the record, can we get those numbers last time? I mean, we didn't break we breaking records, you guys.
For last time I checked, shout out to the homie Dom Kimmy, Nipsey Hussle. we got close to 7,500 spins. I think coming up to last week, which was incredible.
Be close to 10,000 now.
Man. Yeah, I mean, we got over 65% of people. Thank you guys for listening, man. Listen for the full hour. That's tremendous. So if you don't know anything about podcasts, I'm telling you, for us to just start syndicating our show, that is a big achievement. Thank you guys, man, for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you guys for tuning in. And tonight, we're going to hit you with another exciting topic.
That's right.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about Juneteenth versus the 4th of July.
Damn.
Should black people be celebrating it? Why black people celebrate the 4th of July? Do you know what Juneteenth is? Tonight, today, this afternoon, whenever you're listening, you're going to figure that shit out because we're going to talk about it today. But around the table, first off, let me introduce my people. My boy to the right. Say what's up to the people, Josh.
What's happening, everybody? Ladies and gentlemen, children of the world. Glory, glory.
Hey.
It's Wes Strata speaking.
Wes
And you do
Strata.
know that.
Who you got to your right there?
Jai personally.
The one and only, the Lincoln lawyer. Your boy's in the house, the straight abolitionist.
That part.
You know, the descendant of American slaves, if you want to know what nation I celebrate.
We already
Brother,
know where he coming from.
You
today.
already know what it do, and got my, partner right here who's a straight descendant of Cuban slaves. Puerto Rican slaves.
Hope y'all like a sense of humor.
What's happening, y'all? This is your boy, Ray Lewis, RJ Lewis, better known as...
There he is.
If you didn't know,
Remando.
I'm in the building, baby. Hold on one time. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
me,
it's a
y'all.
blessing, ain't it?
What's happening? And to my right, my brother, the other Estrada, the one and only Jason.
Hey, this is Jason Estrada, Estrada Fitness, Peace, Love, and Health. And I couldn't help but see my boy Jai's shirt to say Baywatch, but the BAE. The BAE stands for Black and Educate. I love it, man.
Shout out to Amore Noir, real East Side cats from LA doing their thing, but made in LA.
But we here. So look, to my right, to my immediate right, it's my brother from another mother, Too Sick Jamerson.
Too Sick the Great, James J. You can find us on all the major platforms, Instagram, Twitter. What else are we on?
Oh, that's a question for
We
Josh.
on their mind.
What we on, Josh?
What we on, Wes?
Oh, yeah. We on We Not For Sale on IG and Twitter.
Church.
And we will be on, and that is capital WEKNOT, as in trouble.
Hey,
So
For sale, FORCELL.
Ooh,
Church.
yeah.
And that's on Twitter and Instagram at We Not For Sale. Lock in, please.
for all of y'all who want
We
to follow
appreciate
me, y'all asked me, y'all been asking me. Follow me on We Not For Sale. That's my handle.
Uh-oh,
So
here
if
they come.
you want to holler at Ray directly, go to We Not For Sale.
DM me at We Not
here they
For
come.
Sale. Yeah, I'm
Throw
talking about.
that whistle out there. Throw that whistle out there.
Yes.
We going
That's
10 DMs to 1.
that's an interesting way that we spell sale. Jason, I want you to kind of holler at the people for those who are just tuning in. They may not have listened to episode 1, but we got 6 brothers around this table.
That's right.
break it down for the people and let them know what we're all about with We Not For Sale. How do we come up with that?
Absolutely. We all have been through many things. We've been tried and tested. What we always have came together on is just never compromising our values, and not being for sale is really something that I think is important. So you guys who are listening know that your soul, your spirit, who you are, should never be up for sale. Should never ever be in escrow. And I can break it down to the very last compound, but we all tight, like a knot, but not to be confined to any type of, way of how people perceive us. So a noose will never be around our necks when it comes to how we are and what we believe and what we stand for. And obviously, the sale is, when I think of sale, I think of, a life body that operates, together. And we all understand that the sale, the CELL, can also be seen as something that has hurt our people, has stricken our people, because a lot of us have friends, family, and loved ones that are in a jail cell. But I always tell my brothers and sisters who are behind the walls that they can always trap your body, but they can't trap your mind. And long as you think forward, you can't be left behind. So We Not For Sale is what it is. And I think that every listener should be able to identify with that, because somewhere in your life, somebody's going to want to see how much you cost, how much your soul costs, and what you're willing to do for that dollar, for that almighty dollar. So, you might have to stand up and say, hey, we not for sale.
That's right. Integrity over money. No Steve Harvey.
So, every week we like to get into a little bit of current every week we like to get into a little bit of current affairs. So we're going to kick off into that right now, because I really want to get to the topic this week, fellas, because we're talking about Juneteenth, which is very important, because a lot of people aren't up on that. So stick with us. But current affairs this week, man, did y'all hear Mitch McConnell? They're talking about reparations.
What?
Yeah, we heard him.
Yeah, I heard him.
Loud and clear.
And my boy literally said, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically, I'm going to say it for the people. What y'all want reparations for? We gave y'all Barack Obama. There was your reparation.
Yeah, landmark civil rights legislation as well, is what he said. And it just shows that he's ignorant, because he brought up Barack Obama, who's not even entitled to reparations, as something that we got. But that's the important thing. Obama he don't get that. He wouldn't get reparations.
So when we say reparations, who would get it? Because that's one of the other things he brought up. He says there's been so many people that came to this country that have been done wrong. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but I wouldn't even know who to give it to.
Yeah, and it's clear, the descendants of American slaves, they had census. The whole point of the 3/5 compromise was so, they could, the South could have greater representation in the legislature. And the way we know they know who was here, because they counted. They counted all the slaves. That's how they determined how many legislatures were going to be up there. So they have the census. They know who was there, and we can trace that lineage because it's all documented. So it's my goal, though, now, and I encourage everybody to go to descendantsofamericanslaves.com and sign the petition, because we would like to get that designation on the next census, because that's an easier way for us to start, is having us designate ourselves as descendants of American slaves. And that's who should get it. Descendants of American, and meaning United States of American slaves, not Jamaican slaves, not Haitian slaves, not Cuban slaves. Shout out to them, but this is for us in this land.
Ray, what do you think is appropriate? I mean, if they came to you and said, all right, what do you want?
Oh, man, it's tough.
Because originally, what was it, 40 acres and a mule?
Yeah, they say 40 acres and a mule, but in inflation, it should be about 100 acres in a whole farm at this point. But if they ask me what kind of reparations would equate to, the standing or the equality of what's right, I wouldn't be the one to ask. because I look at this life and I look at the monetary usage of our people, man, and we'll blow that shit on a big screen TV in a heartbeat.
Right.
Giving our people
Chappelle Show,
money, or giving our people land, and you don't even have an entrepreneur mindset as is, you're just going to stimulate the economy. You're looking at a tax check. And that's the real issue, man. And looking at the reparation speeches and people having, different levels of understanding of what it takes to make someone whole. Money doesn't make you whole. Reparations to me is not just financial, and it's not just economical as a whole. It's also heavily associated with mental health. It's also heavily associated with health care. Other countries have free health care. We don't. Other countries have free education. We don't. Other countries have access to informational programs that is illegal in this country. So I think reparations has to be considered more than just economical, man. And we got to get down to the real root of what's going on.
James, what do you see as proper reparations for our people?
I think they need to allow us. I think we all need a fair shake from the government. We need some more support from the government, and I think if we had more support from the government, meaning some of us were able to open up businesses and had more support from our government, so where we can get loans and
that's what I was going to ask you,
and things in that nature. I think that will help us out as Black people.
No interest loans.
Right. I mean, just like the Chinese people. The Chinese people, they got a ton of support. Like we don't really have it's safe to say that we don't have a full Black community, especially in LA, like to the point where it's like I can name you got Koreatown, you got Chinatown, and it's like, how are all these towns formed? And I don't know how much time it took to form these towns, but how are they formed so quickly? And what type of support that they have? They got support from their government. You
don't think of like Watts as an area that you can say represents?
Because when I think of when you look at someone like a Chinatown, like Chinatown or whatever town I went to not too long ago, where you can drive down the street and you can see a Best Western, and it also have Chinese language in it on the side of it, or when you look at the gas station that's owned by a Chinese man, or when you look at all the businesses up and down that strip, hamburger spots, Chinese food restaurants, all those owned by Chinese people, we don't have an actual. I mean, you could say somewhat maybe the Crenshaw district, a little bit
Lamert
of Lamert Park, but I'm talking about like,
and we rent those businesses a lot.
Exactly, like we don't have real ownership in those businesses.
But how do you accomplish that?
We need support from the government.
But like welfare support? What type of support are you talking about to get a loan? You want educational programs? Because if you ask me, I say the quickest form of reparations is to say, free student loans, or
that's perfect.
African Americans or descendants of slaves get education
no
free.
You and I just for 100 years.
No, you and I just talked about this the other day. Right? What did you mention to me? What type of loan you were going to get for your son?
What day was this when I was talking?
This is
Saturday.
Saturday. What type of loan you mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
And you said that out of everybody that was at the college fair, no one decided to go over there and talk to them. Now, what kind of loan is that?
It was the Jewish loan, the interest-free loan.
No one knows about that. That was the first time you educated me on that when you told me about that. So why is it that no one knows about that?
Gotta do your homework.
And you got to walk up to the empty tables at fairs, apparently.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
That's what you did, Mike.
No, the sign was big as day. It said, Jewish interest-free loan. I'm with that.
Interest.
I saw interest-free. I'm with that.
Interest-free.
So, Jason, what's your thoughts on reparations?
I'm gonna say it's plain and simple. Do I believe in loans? No. Do I believe that we should ever beg our enemy for anything? No. Do I feel like that we have been tricked on in terms of how we should educate ourselves about the laws of nature? I do. One of the biggest things is generating electricity from the ground, and no one knows how to do that. But I think that the religion in particular plays a big part in you wanting to get your power from a fictional character, which I feel like the power that actually will save your life, you can generate from the ground. And I can quote Dr. Sebi. He has said that on many occasions, copper and carbon with friction creates electricity. There are people who are powering their iPhones with lemons. You can power your whole house with a watermelon. There is so much natural electricity that we pass up all this jungle land just to live in a populated city with polluted air and crowded freeways, and then say we want reparations. I really don't get that mindset when 85% of the United Northern America is unoccupied, and we are not tapping into that. I think that that's a problem. I think that it's on us to educate our families, and long as we consider ourselves as someone who has to beg for something, we'll always be owned. We'll always be in slavery.
So it sounds like you want to separate.
Yeah.
You don't want reparations. You want to separate from white people from the United States. You want your own.
Yeah,
shit.
it's not
I'll
about
take
white
that.
people. I think it's just it could be a group of individuals who are enlightened.
Mhm.
I think that I want to separate from the distractions. I want to separate from what's holding us back mentally. I think that I want to separate from what's causing so much mental health illness in our lives. Was creating a mindset of individuals who seek to justify their level of success by how much things they can buy material wise. I think that in itself has been our biggest demise. And long as there is a black face showing you how to play basketball, showing you how to act, showing you how to sing, we'll continue to be under that hypnosis. So we can no longer sell our art. We can no longer sell our athleticism. We have to make sure we own that.
Man, you too quiet, Josh.
All right, man. Hey, the best thinkers are the best listeners, man. And all these brothers have said exceptional things. And
What you want the government to give you?
it's not necessarily, what I want the government to give me. As everybody has said at this table, I want to not be undermined by our government.
Mhm.
We're way past the 40 acres and a mule, as Ray just said. I want a better educational system. I want to be taught, and my children to be taught, how to be self-reliant. As Jason was saying,
Powerful.
how to create your own. What's been mistaught, as far as religion, the medical industry, the educational system. We have to deprogram ourselves and actually get to what's real and the actual facts of where all this shit started. So I rather, focus on that than actually asking for something from the government myself.
You hear that, Mitch?
Yeah.
You hear that, Mitch?
Hey, I do want to say though, real quick, though reparations are owed, it is not something we should wait for nor expect. But
Yeah.
let's be clear, they are owed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you want?
What I want, I will take 100 to 150 years of no income tax for descendants of American slaves, because if we kept it on education, a lot of people don't go do formal education but still have decent lives. But that's something we could all directly benefit from as individuals, is not having to pay income tax.
Or
watched-
loans with no interest.
I watched somebody that I grew up around, kill somebody over $100 that they owed him. Shot his brother in his back. Now, and their family members. When we say somebody owes us, our mindset, if it ain't taking it there, we shouldn't even mention the word because I feel like no one's willing to do that. Nobody's willing to say, hey, you know what? Let's ride. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to hear about trying to get something from somebody that owed us something over 100 years. I've never heard of that being justifiable. If that's the case, and it's not enough writers.
So when Mitch McConnell says, none of us were here 150 years ago, as far as I'm concerned, they're all dead and gone, and we can't be held accountable for America's original sin, you kind of agree with that statement?
I don't agree with his statement at all. I just don't subscribe to it.
Gotcha.
Well, what I subscribe to is what the nation is built on, which is documents that currently exist and that are fully qualified to indict every man in this room. Yet and still, what we're owed is not addressed. So to me, it's about a simple 4-letter word that gets used against me, generally in relationship tense, is be fair. Bottom line is, if you're going to use documents to uphold laws against me, then use documents to give me what's my just due. So
that kind of helps kind of trend toward what we're talking about tonight with this Juneteenth versus 4th of July. And Jai, I want to go to you first because we're talking about documents. So I want to set the base here. And if you could just kind of read just a little portion of the Declaration of Independence. And I think that's where we can kind of start with our dialogue tonight. I'm going to give you a second to pull that up because, I celebrate the 4th of July. I grew up celebrating the 4th of July. I hang a flag outside my house on the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. I hang the American flag up there. What's so wrong about celebrating the 4th of July?
All right. Well, I think we should let's just go right into it. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. So that's them saying it's time for us to separate, and it's right for us to tell you why. Why?
And just to be clear, because, some of us don't know, but these are the founding fathers
of the United States of America.
The original 13 colonies saying to the British, we're done. We're fed up. I believe they had actually started the war a few months earlier, breaking away, and they finally sat down and says, all right, we're going to tell y'all what's going on.
Yeah. And that's what also allowed other nations to recognize them as a nation, which was a very big part of their success in the Revolutionary War. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the reason why we should not celebrate the 4th of July as our holiday in any kind of way is because at the time they wrote this, all men are created equal. They meant that. But what did they hold? They held slaves. So what does that mean? We were not men. We were not human. At the inception of this nation, our descendants, our ancestors were not considered human. They were chattel. They were animals. And so when we celebrate the 4th of July, we're celebrating that these white people got free but continue to dehumanize our ancestors. And that is why I say we should not celebrate the 4th of July.
Yeah, that's powerful. But when I look at it, am I looking at it from the inception of what the document meant, or can I change it to what I want it to mean at this point in my life?
Okay, so Mike, what does that flag mean to you?
When I hang my flag out, I'm celebrating the great nation that I live in. And I think it's a great nation.
And so by hanging that flag, you recognize that you're saying slavery happened. It is what it is. It was okay for them to do that because that's what led to my nation being great.
No, I'm not even looking back that far. I'm looking at where I am today in this society, what I think of the country and what it has become, and I'm honoring the fact where we have come from. I'm honoring the fact that we have overcome slavery. I'm honoring the fact that we have rights now that were intended to us. I'm honoring the fact that we can vote. I'm basically saying I want to be a part of this nation, and I want this nation to become what it should be.
And I dig that, and I thought that very many. Let's be clear: the 4th of July was my favorite holiday,
Right.
my favorite, and the number one
The rest
reason
of us
why
just trying to pop some fireworks and hang out with the family.
That's what it was really about. But it was also
Barbecue
for
some
me
asparagus or something.
deeply. I would read the Declaration of Independence every 4th of July, but until my last experiences with law enforcement, being in that Clark County detention center, being in that San Bernardino County jail, that's what made me read it again. And like they said, all men are created equal. At the same time, they held men as slaves. Therefore, they weren't talking about me. They are not talking about me. And there is no document in American government, in anywhere, in any literature that has now deemed me a part of this nation, because the 3/5 clause is still there. The Dred Scott decision is still there. And the 13th Amendment still says that we can be slaves. And the 13th Amendment says slavery nor involuntary servitude. So when they delineate between the two, they're letting you know slavery is for you niggas and involuntary servitude is for everybody else.
I'm going to come to Jason in a minute, but I want to clarify something, because we are in episode 2, and my man was talking a lot about being in a cell and being locked up and all that. He's a Lincoln lawyer. So he wasn't talking about being locked up for some bullshit, and we're going to get into it later on down the road, but there was some injustice done to him while he was attempting to do his job as a lawyer in court, which led to some contempt of charges and things like that. But I just want y'all to know that it's no bullshit where he was locked up for selling weed or whatever, but we'll get back to that. Yeah. But Jason, I want to go to you and get your thoughts on the...
Now, at this time, there was 13 colonies, and they were all in one area of the United States as we know it today on the map that they show us today. Now, the rest of the United States of America had still at that time had indigenous colonies. Now, some of us, we can't decide that, okay, we want to be descendants of slaves, and then when our grandma tells us she was a Seminole, or when she's a Choctaw Indian or a Cherokee, and those were specifically in regions where, the 13 colonies were not. Are we to just say, well, rule out that and just go off of the fact that we descendants of slaves? Because if that was the case, there were many people of color who didn't even know about the 13 colonies at that time because they were in their indigenous villages.
That's true. I mean, I don't think that just because you have melanin in your skin, you're entitled to anything. I think Jai made it very clear that entitlement or reparations are for descendants of American slaves. And that is a very specific population, and that takes research, which is one of the primary reasons we started this podcast in the first place, was to give people not only opinions, but facts. We want people to understand that, though we are very opinionated black men, we are also factual black men, and our opinions, most of them are derived from facts. And I think that when it comes to the simple idea of how we celebrate each holiday, it's hard not to be cynical, man, and just enjoy the moments. I mean, we've had so many things happen in our lives, man, and then, generally speaking, in the corporate world, someone gives you a day off, and you want to be with your family. You want to celebrate it. The 4th of July means a lot to me. One of my close friends was killed on the 4th of July. One of my friends' birthdays is the 4th of July. It's always those two contrasts always, constantly remind me to be grateful for my life. Constantly reminds me every time I hear a firework. I know you guys can definitely empathize with me when you correlate that to gunshots. Yeah. That was also a time where my uncle used to let me fire his guns, where I can really put my hands on a gun and fire it and feel like, man, I'm not going to get in trouble. It's cool. So I'm on 120th, in Van Ness.
Real life GIO.
Yeah, in the backyard firing a gun.
That was you, nigga? I was on First Ave.
That was me.
So there's some people listening to the podcast going, what the fuck? And there's some people like, yeah.
For real.
Right, I get it.
So we all got to keep in mind, man, that, shit can get real deep. However, the surface level, is also very relevant.
Yeah.
I got a question for Jay, man.
Yes, sir.
You know, because the funny thing today is I had a conversation with my 10-year-old, and just talking about. I wanted to know, did he know the meaning of the 4th of July? And it's funny, like when you think about it, like most kids, they're out of school around the 4th of July, and
Right.
I'm curious to know that have any. Well, this is for Jai too, and for all you brothers. Did you guys learn about the 4th of July in school, or was it just like a thing that you just embraced in the summertime and the fireworks and the barbecue and everything else? Like, did you actually learn about it in school?
I can tell you this because I probably date some of you guys a little bit. I learned about the 4th of July on Saturday morning on ABC with those little cartoon shorts and shit with the dude who was like, I'm just a bill and all that shit. That's how I learned about government.
And
Right.
I was
And-
borrowing how the
and-
government
and-
worked, by the way. That I'm just a bill is legit.
And on top of that, I wanted to
Social
know
studies.
when did you decide to like remove it from remove yourself from
Yeah.
celebrating? Like, when did you become educated about the true meaning of it? Because like I said, my 10-year-old was like, when I asked him about the 4th of July, he's like, well, you pop fireworks and then you eat barbecue.
Yeah.
And
And that's I did learn about it in school. I remember being taught about it as something very something to be proud about as an American. And as an American, if you are an American, you should be proud about it. Let's be clear about that. It's something to be very proud. You took on, with your ragtag army, you took on the greatest military force on earth and you won.
Right.
You should be proud about that. But my point in reading the Declaration of Independence, specifically the part about all men being created equal while they held slaves, means that did not apply to us. So I want to be clear. If you are celebrating the 4th of July as support for your white friends who are proud about what happens, that's one thing. The same way we might, take a day of fasting in solidarity with our Muslim brethren, or we may go to a bar mitzvah or something to support our Jewish friend, right? I'm okay with doing it that way, but I also want to be clear. I am, to answer your question, it's earlier this year after those experiences is when I realized I am not an American. This does not apply to me. I am a descendant of American slaves. I have I'm on paper American, right? I can vote, and I think we should use everything we have at our disposal to build our descendant of American slave nation. But if I was a full-fledged American, then on July 4th, 1776, my ancestors would have been free.
Right.
That's a great point.
Now, Juneteenth, break it down for us, Jai, so that the listeners know what Juneteenth is, if they didn't know.
I mean, because that's the alternative. That's what we're saying. Listen, for us, we shouldn't be celebrating the 4th of July. We should be celebrating Juneteenth. That's what we're trying to say. That's more relevant for us as people, right? That's what we're trying to say.
And
here.
Juneteenth, basically, January 1st, 1863 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to be read and the slaves were supposed to be freed. January 1st, 1963.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln read the Emancipation Proclamation.
1963 or
1863.
Okay.
18, my apologies. So would that happen, and slaves in Virginia, West Virginia, Mississippi, a lot of them were
Confederate
free,
states.
slaves throughout the Confederate. Texas being the most remote slave-holding state, it took a little while for the Union soldiers to make it to Texas.
2 years.
So they just didn't tell the slaves, like, y'all was free.
Was it 2 years or was it 1 year?
It was 2 years. It was June of 1865 that the Union soldiers finally landed in Texas and told the slaves they're free. When the slaves heard the news, they celebrated, they partied, they had the red water, the watermelon, they barbecued. And that's why we do it on Juneteenth, because that was finally the end of the chattel slavery period as we knew it, where a private citizen could hold another human being as property. And that is why we celebrate Juneteenth, because that is when slavery was finally over. That chattel slavery period in the United States was finally over. But just how cold was those Texas slave owners?
But not even that. Like, go deeper with it, because they had started moving from some of those southern states to Texas, because a lot of those folks in, Mississippi, Georgia, whatever, Florida, they knew it was coming down. So they started migrating all their slaves and some of their business to Texas, the most remote part of the United States at that time.
Yeah, similar to how people correlate with taxes or correlate with laws. Things that's going on in the state of Georgia as far as, abortions and are making people decide whether they want to live in that state or not.
Right. A lot of people want to live in California just because of our gun laws.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's that's what Juneteenth is, and that's why we should celebrate. Though, I believe it was which one of y'all Estradas was like, man, that's some slave shit. And I understand that too, but I would, I think that's a important point of view to discuss, because what I see Juneteenth is as, and what I believe it should be, is our Passover, our one time a year that we acknowledge what we went through as a people, that we are now free. We remember it so we don't have to dwell on it, but we address it every year. We let our children know every year, but we don't dwell on it. And the rest of the year we go out and live our lives. That's what I envision Juneteenth being for the Black community.
Live our lives as slaves. That's kind of how I look at it. It's like, at the end of the day, they just changed the verbiage. I don't think that there's ever been a freedom of slavery. I think they just changed the verbiage because
there has not. There's no document.
When you look at it, at the end of the day, you are definitely going to be held to a slave standard when you carry yourself in a nation that is full of master manipulators and artful deceivers. Many of us understand that. Mm-hmm. So whether or not you want to celebrate the holidays, I think what I like specifically about the July 4th, the Declaration of Independence declaration itself. This is the first time I've actually read it. It's a pretty interesting read if you guys look at it. But you have the authors of that who are writing and saying, okay, we have been held against our will. We have not been given equal rights. We have been treated unfairly. We have been told we could not speak up against the British government. We've been told that, and sounds like the same thing that was going on right now when people are saying Donald Trump's in office. We've been, we feel like we've been held against our rights and so on and so forth. Right. And I just thought, like, my first light bulb that went out in my head was like, we need to actually form a union, write a Declaration of Independence, and get down.
That's a descendant of American slave nation that I'm talking about.
Say that again. Saying the same thing again, Jason, because I really want to drive home that point. Like you're saying, as a people now.
I thought it was so gangster that they wrote this down, right? And was like, hey, no more. We not standing up for this against the British government. But no longer will we be a part of you guys. And by the way, we just kicked y'all butts in war. Right. And if y'all want to go to war again, we about that life. We about that life. So I feel like we need to actually form our own nation, nation of people. Mm-hmm. And it can be blacks, whites. I was the president of the Black Student Union in college, and majority of our members were white and Asian. So I'm okay with, hey, let's get a culture of people who all believe the same thing or the same principle, and let's actually form our own Declaration of Independence and ride.
And that's where I'm at with it. I'm more so just learning both sides of the history and becoming free thinkers, and encouraging our kids to become free thinkers. And I believe that our history really was put there for a reason. Nothing is done by accident from my perspective. And I think that as long as we continue to educate, and let our people know what went down in our history and how it affected us, will allow us to sit back and say, okay, let's do this. And as Mike said, the progress, from, the 1800s, 1700s, in all the history, you're more excited for like, wow, we came a long way. Am I right?
That's the way I look at it. We've come a long way. We have something to celebrate.
And you learn so much.
I've learned so much, even when I was going through this whole process of looking at reasons for celebrating this holiday versus that holiday. You know, I didn't know that there were 5,000 black men that fought against the British, you know, and I read that. I went, wow. And I want to go deeper and like,
Exactly.
how did these 5,000 dudes feel about fighting for the British? And I was reading from
you said fighting for or against the
fighting
British?
against the British.
Yeah, because there was a lot that fought for them as well.
Right. But the thing that struck me, it was so funny, is I was reading, you know, some quotes from what some of these people wrote down, and it's like they fought against the British because they thought, you know, this was the right thing to do, and they felt like their lives would be better if they weren't under British rule. And I said to myself, they were dead fucking wrong.
Well,
that's the belief.
Let's not get it twisted. They necessarily fought because if they didn't fight, then they would be killed. And we have to understand that that's a point. Okay, we not for sale. So who's willing to die for what you believe?
Well, let's remember, because the first person to die in the American Revolution, Crispus Attucks, was a black man
in Boston.
Now, some people will say he was just drunk and talking shit, and that's why he got killed. But others,
a brother drunk and talking shit. Nah.
But let's be clear. I mean, we have been the people we are, and we really love people. You know, and if you're born in 1776, right? So you're born in 1750. This is all you know. Your experience as a slave is all you know. You've never known freedom. And these people, for a slave, treat you well. The same way some of our dogs will jump in front of a bullet for us because we treat our dogs so well. That's how that slave mentality was for a lot of people. As you pointed out in a previous podcast, some of their day-to-day lives were actually much better than most people. If you had a wealthy master that you know allowed you to build nice accommodations and allowed you to eat higher up off the hog, then you were living better than poor white people.
And you were proud. You were proud to wear that brand.
And you were proud to wear that brand.
It's kind of like what Mike was saying, that
Gucci.
Some people, they took their business. Some people took their business to Texas, right?
Too sick got the Gucci shit.
Yeah. So when you think about people taking their whole business to another place where there's more slaves, what do you think about? You think about cheap labor. Yeah. You think about, you know, basically getting people to work for free.
Yeah, that's what it was for. And I mean, but I think this nation, what you said, Jason, is so important, because that is how the key thing on us declaring ourselves an independent nation is so we can be recognized by other foreign entities, by other states that can recognize us. And what leads me to that is if we go to and I'm gonna do this for you, right? Matthew 22, starting at about 17. That's when they were trying to catch Jesus up, asking him about the imperial tax, saying, you know, should we pay this? And when Jesus responded, you know, look at the coin that you used to pay. Whose image is on Caesar? So give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and render unto me what is mine.
Okay, and so what did that mean at that time? That there was a whole nation of people living within Rome who were not Romans. That's Jesus and his people were living amongst the Romans, but they weren't Romans, but they were an independent nation. That's why when they came,
but they also had to follow the rules of the land.
I'm not saying don't follow the rules of the land. I'm just saying recognize you're not part of that nation.
And that's, I mean, I get the idea, and to me it makes perfect sense in terms of developing leadership, coming up with people who are intellectually inclined and capable of establishing an idea of how things should go, and then having a cohesiveness to actually follow through with it. You know, but it almost seems like, okay, at that time they got fed up, but they also had the financial means, right?
Yeah, because of slavery.
We don't, you know, and you know, I just don't know what part of us. And I say us, being as though a descendant of an American slave, is cohesive. I mean, you got motherfuckers voting for Trump left and right, saying that they not. You got people really like to be enslaved because they know that the corporate world allows them, easy access to get paid every 2 weeks.
Because they on that good
You
plantation.
got people, we talk this shit about freeing ourselves, but let somebody healthcare or let they check go missing for a week, they'll be right back up there doing the same shit.
And that's why it's important to point. I'm not talking about quitting our jobs. I'm not talking about leaving at this point.
That's what you're talking about.
And see,
that's probably what it would
you're talking
ultimately
about.
lead to. But what I'm talking about right now is changing, because part of the biggest problem in our community, why we are not cohesive, because what are we cohesive to? We cannot righteously, if we're self-loving, give our dedication to this nation, to this flag, that our when we fly that flag, and I got pictures all over social media with the flag, face painted red, white, and blue. I really believe that's why I was so hurt when the reality hit me, because I really believed my granddaddy was in uniform, my daddy was in uniform. Man, I damn near signed up at a certain point. I believed in it so much, and I just wanted to be able to give a service to my nation, to my country, which I thought was my country, but it's really not, and it's not for a lot of people, and that's why we can't have that cohesion, because what are we being cohesive for?
I think we have to really rationale the idea of what cohesion really is. When you look at that document, a lot of things stood out to me back in the day, and a lot of things stand out now. One thing is for sure, okay? In that document, you'll find that the word creator is capitalized.
Yeah.
You'll also find that the word man is capitalized.
Yeah.
And any time a man tries to be on the same level of a creator, you will not have cohesion, and you will have nothing but lies and deceit. I'm here to tell you, listeners, hear me and hear me clear. First of all, cohesion in my mind comes from one place, period. All right? That is the spirit and the love of God. The most foremost commandment in the word of God, being the Bible, is to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It supersedes and it embodies almost every commandment.
Mm-hmm.
If you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you will be in line, you will be cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
That rarely happens these days. We look at our neighbor, especially someone that looks like us, as the enemy.
Because that is what this nation socialized us to do.
No, that started from Cain and Abel.
Okay, it did.
But
so in this nation, though, because those 13 colonies wasn't all on the same page, they got cohesive against this enemy. That's why they came together, because 80 years later they had a civil war.
But
then they became worse. Then they became worse
than the enemy.
Of course.
So now it's like, okay, do we want to have a nation? Do we want to have our own independent nation just so we can become the nation that's putting us all in slavery and oppressing all these people? What is the whole agenda behind it? Because I don't want to hear about no reparations, because I don't necessarily believe in the intention behind it. And that, to me, it's kind of like, it rubs me the wrong way. Because at the end of the day, if we put a spin on it and go into the health industry, and that's kind of like my whole thing, that's my forte, that's my specialty. When I look at how many clients I have to literally walk through the pros and cons of every single medication that they're on and saying, hey, I can't believe your doctor has never explained to you the side effects of the medications, the 14 medications that you're currently taking, and the side effects that they all have. And for your actual symptoms, you're having every single side effect that's on here that actually is worse than what you were actually diagnosed with, and could actually cause or increase what you're diagnosed with. And that is the same form of nation, the same type of the same type of manipulation. That's the same type of clan. With the guy with the mask that's basically robbing you of your own soul. And we can't point that out to our people, if I can't go up to every single person in my family and say, look, the doctors never explained this to you, and there's no way I can teach them how to be free as an individual.
Yeah, well, self-determination is a real thing, and we've had those examples. Marcus Garvey was one. The Nation of Islam is one. Marcus Garvey, I think he failed because of just the lack of know-how in the moment. But had they known how to do it, and had they done it correctly, that nation I'm talking about would be alive and well today. The Nation of Islam, I don't think it can be rooted in any religion. It should be rooted in the God of nature and the God of the universe, but not in any particular religion.
Marcus Garvey
or
the Nation of Islam, and nobody who I've ever heard leading our people has ever really been so passionate about the health of our people. And that's a fact. When we still have a McDonald's in every single country, we still have fast food.
Well, McDonald's wasn't there when Marcus Garvey was.
Well, okay, we still had things that chicken wings and collard greens boiled in pig feet oil. We still had all of that. I don't want to hear nothing. When we abandon the nature, when we abandon our true mother, and we start eating things that we're not supposed to eat, obviously we're going to be under hypnosis of the slave master.
So where do
forever.
you see this? Because I'm trying to find the steps in what you see. So where do you see the steps in getting this cohesive nation together that Jai is talking about? Where do you think it starts?
It starts with people who
descendant of AmericanSlaves.com.
It starts with people who actually value, like what my brother Ray said. And this is, I think it's one of the most important things we should all know is that we should honor ourselves as honor our neighbors, serve our neighbors, serve ourselves. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
That means that you need to make sure at all costs that you are catering to what makes you more vital, what makes you have more quality years on earth on a daily basis. Everything starts with you. There's no way I can get upset with this guy, whoever the politician guy is, if I'm not starting with my family. Yeah, and I'm gonna continue to emphasize that because now I become powerful. I take hold of the power because guess what? Now I'm actively teaching my family to seek out methods that hasn't been taught through education. I'm teaching them to go outside and study the sky, understand how to meditate, know exactly what foods to eat and how you can grow your own garden and how we can actually generate electricity from the ground. I'm teaching them that.
I think, ultimately, man, I don't know if we're chasing a pie in the sky. When I read my word, it's very clear. Something stood out to me as, very early as a kid. It really stuck with me because I saw a lot of death very early. But what good is it for a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Are we trying to gain the world? Do we believe that we can make this world so great that you would want to be here rather than live a manifested life in terms of purposeful life and elevate to the status that the Lord would have you whenever he calls you home? One thing that I learned very early is that I will not be here forever. Mm-hmm. I believe that. I believe that with all of my heart. And I believe that energy, shout out to the Estradas, does live on. Mm-hmm. However, my soul has a destination, period. And while I'm on this earth, by design, God has given me certain tools and certain gifts to be used for the benefit of the purposes he has for me. Shout out to my son, Devin Ray Jakir Lewis. That is for sure my purpose. Everything else can be speculated upon. You're listening and you love my voice. I have no idea if that's truly my purpose, but my son for sure is my purpose. And I think we need to recognize that, man. We can't be living this life as if tomorrow is promised and trying to set all this shit up and then not living a meaningful life because we think that it's some reparations coming down the road, or it's a house coming down the road, or a car coming around the road, or none of that shit.
But that's what
I
I'm
think
saying.
The biggest reparation we can ever pay ourselves is to procreate. And that's one thing that the government has always been afraid of. So we have so many methods of depopulation that exists that I think that the biggest thing that we can actually pay ourselves back is to procreate and sustain our lives.
Tell me this, do you all feel as if you're full-fledged citizens of this United States of America?
No.
On paper?
On paper.
Yeah, not fully. Like, it's just it's so much stuff that we see, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you see kids getting gunned down by policemen and they just get off, like, you know what I'm saying?
Rehired.
And rehired and then getting promotions, and it's like this shit been going on forever.
A lot of them cats in the Rampart scandal are still there.
I still think about how far we have came. Like, you think about when they used to make black people sit in the back of the bus. You know what I'm saying? But that shit don't really matter. Niggas get in the back of the bus anyway.
Yeah.
You watch a bunch of kids get on the bus, the first thing
I definitely went straight to the back.
They go straight to the back.
That's true.
But that was because, I don't do that as an older person when I ride the bus, but as a kid, you was just trying to get away from the authority.
Either way, they're doing it now at their own discretion. If they want to sit in the fucking back of the bus, it's more so their own discretion than someone saying.
But they have a choice.
Right. They got a choice.
But
it's not like someone saying you're not good enough to sit up here with us.
But my point in asking that question is, if we are not, and I look at us as lessees in America, not owners, right? So we got the right to be in the apartment as long as we pay our dues, but they can change the rules and kick us out at any moment.
It's like you always say. We're second-class citizens.
We are, and that's why I stopped being American, because I refuse to accept that status. Like on paper, I'm gonna keep what's on paper. I'll vote when it benefits me, but everything I do now is for the benefit of the descendant of American slave nation, and that is the nation. And maybe one day we can come together as one nation, but we cannot do that under the flag that enslaved our people. We look ridiculous raising the flag that enslaved our people.
So let me ask you this,
so
Jai.
when you look at the history, as James was saying, one of the most prominent concentrations was, the Black Wall Street, and what happened in that situation where you have all these loving people who want to unite. And we're talking about black businesses in which, until the Tulsa race came over, in which you had white residents, massacre 26 black African-American residents. And you see all these things happen in history. And then you have fear on the average human being like us and say, okay, well, they tried. Well, I don't want to do that. At the end of the day, it's like, what do you want to die for?
Right.
Like, what are you willing to sacrifice your life for? That's how I look at it. And then I have I see my family and I'm like, man, I can ride, you know what I'm saying? But I got to take care of mine as well. So I'm calling, this loop in the seesaw, like, okay, I'm going to do what I can control, love, put out energy. And that's how I actually, that's my whole aura around me, the energy of love. And that's how I control, my future.
Right.
Period.
We got to be careful with this separatist movement, because my question to Jai is, if we do a very distinct history check and a census of our lineage and come to find out you're not part of that descendant of American slave, or you find out that I'm not, or you find out that one of these brothers are not, are you not going to represent me? Are you not going to ride for me?
I'm gonna ride for you, period. As the bond we have as brothers, as friends, right? But that's like basically saying I can't have no Jamaican homies that I would ride for, no African homies that I would ride for. They have a nation that they subscribe to that's different from our nation, right? If and saying our nation, if we're accepting America as our nation, then they already have a different one, and we already got those loved ones that we would ride for. So that's not it. It's just so we can determine for ourselves who we are, so we can be proud of something and we can be going in a direction that can actually build something. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about a state which has a defined borders. I'm talking about a nation, which is the like-minded folks and the like experienced folks.
But what I'm saying is that you can come into this nation and you can be outside of being a descendant of an American slave and still experience the separatism that's going on in this country and still be entitled, in my mind, to the same reparations as someone else.
This is the difference, Ray. They were never disallowed to read, to have bank accounts, to be humans. This was our humanity was denied our ancestors. That's what makes us different.
Well, yes, per se. Some cultures have experienced, and it's arguable, worse.
And we got to keep in mind the world.
Like who?
Yeah, I want to hear that.
I mean,
hold on.
He's right. I think we got to keep in mind that who are we fighting? I mean, the world is ran by 13 rich family colonies. I mean, the 13 richest families actually run the world. They are royal families So who are we really fighting? Do we even know who those individuals are?
I think that mentality, keeps a lot of us from ever trying, because of that. To believe that 13 families is just running the world like that,
they're the same family that gave you the Boule movement. They're the same family that gave you the Christian church, the Muslim church.
I get all that, but what I'm telling you is I think there's, that mentality is what keeps a lot of us from trying. And I don't even think that as hard as I see you go, you gotta believe there's some reason that you can do that. You can't be believing you doing everything you doing just so one of these 13 family members can take it from you whenever they so please.
Because I believe in that they figured out how to make us be brainwashed to feel like that we're gonna have to take on this huge army instead of understanding that we can look within ourselves and find enlightenment.
Man.
So I think
but I'm not asking for a fight. I'm not talking about a fight. I do think in our nation we should be prepared and we should arm ourselves and be able to defend ourselves. But us trying to take over America, that's not going to happen.
But you just said you weren't American.
Yeah.
So when you say I'm not American, but you got to show your passport or ID every time you fly out the country.
Yeah, on paper.
You are asking for a fight.
Well, he's saying he's American on paper.
Well, if you tell someone that I'm not American and you go to the airport and say that and they're like, well, you got an American passport, what they going to do? They're going to put your ass in jail.
But that's not based on who you subscribe to mentally. That's based on where you're born. And
that's why we got to
factors.
make sure that when we say we ready to fight, certain things you have to understand, okay, you can possess a certain mind frame mentally, but physically, I mean, you're going to have to it's going to be something force, but you got to be really about that life.
But when we are all, because remember, what's that second book of the Bible, Raymond?
Why you want to know? It's not just Exodus.
Because
I knew you was going to say that.
But the important part about that is they were all ready to go and mobilize to go because they were a unified nation.
Hey, we're talking about the Spirit of God moving, little fella.
And that's what I think that is moving me right now, big guy.
We're talking about the Spirit of God, baby.
The Spirit of God is moving. The Spirit of God moved me to give up my American.
Nah, man.
I want to hit on something real fast because, Jason, you put something out there, and I want to know what you're talking about. What is this 13 families you're talking about that run the world?
13 royal families. I mean, many probably know, like, some of the most famous ones, which is like the Rockefeller family or the Rothschild family. The Rothschild family, I believe they actually started the banking system as we know it today. And before that, I mean, we talking about Genesis, the book of Genesis, the genealogy of ISIS. This goes back further than we talk about pharaohs. And there was always these patriarchal families that had a hierarchy system in which they basically distributed power. When are we ever going to realize that there's a pyramid on the back of our dollar that every nation pays homage to? Oh. So, okay, look, we are literally stuck in this matrix. Whether or not you want to fight white people because they said something or they put you in slavery, man, slavery, we was putting each other in slavery before. Black people been putting people in slavery. They were some of the first slave owners on this land. I don't know if everybody understands how deep this patriarchal system.
Well, slave in America meant something different than in other parts of the country.
It don't matter what book.
Other parts of the world. Slavery in America was permanent.
Listen to me.
That wasn't the case in
it's always been permanent. That's why the pyramid is on the back of your dollar, brother. You spending something that's cut from a tree.
What do you spend, Jay?
I spend money, but guess what? I don't ask for it. So when you look at it, I have to work.
Hold on, I just saw Nicole Murphy earlier today and I'm like, so you telling me you just working her out and you ain't asked for no money?
I'm gonna tell you just like this. When it comes to my current state, my kids will never have my current state.
What you mean?
He's trying to say he's rich, y'all. That means he's fucking rich.
That means that in terms of
he's the brokest he ever gonna be right now.
Bottom line is he's on top of that pyramid. He's fucking rich.
In terms of how this thing works, in order to actually free ourselves to the point to where we do have time to take a year off to really put some things together, like Ray said, many people can't take a year off. They can't even take 2 weeks off without feeling like, dang, I got to go back to work. And I got to, even though I want to march, even though I want to stand up for something, even though I want to ride, man, my family depends on it. Guess what? I can do that.
One paycheck away.
And guess what? I can teach other people how to do that. But who's teaching people how to get out of debt?
And you should,
right now,
but I'm not proposing a fight. I'm just changing the mindset.
Right now, that's a good
What are we talking about?
analogy what you're talking about, Jay. I think we all commend you for where you're at, but realistically, our people just not there. We can't take a year off of not making no money, or don't matter how, if you teach them how to get out of debt, some people are just going to be in debt based on their living situations.
Man,
you got to keep that in mind, that everybody's not.
We're in debt to
situation.
ourselves. Forget about money for a second. Let's look at
some people just got to live, bro.
Hey,
Everybody's
look,
not in your situation.
You can walk past 10 apple trees and say I'm hungry too.
Okay, but what is that going to do with you supplying a roof over your head and you making minimum
You can
wage?
learn how to build shelter just like the indigenous people did before money was even in a circuit.
Who wants to stay in a fucking shelter? Nigga, we talking realistically here. Not
the
no
whole
fucking
point,
treehouse fantasy.
but the whole reason you think like that, Jay, in my belief, is because you're free to think that way. And if we get our people to think that way, then they would look at the situation.
So who's leading us is what I'm asking. There has to be somebody who's actually half blind leading the blind, because then now we got a bunch of people that's half blind leading the blind. So the person with 2 eyes should lead the half blind, and the person who actually has his third eye open should be immortal. I'm gonna close on that one because I feel like there's so many things that we can, so many things we could take from it, man. So many bars on top of bars that we gotta really have our third eye open.
Hey, real talk. And I think we all teaching each other, at the end of the day.
We are.
And that's one thing you have to say. We all are rich in soul, in mind, body, and spirit. And
I'm
that's
not
why
as rich as that
actually,
nigga, man. I want to start talking like that.
Man, I want to talk like
James
that.
Johnson, if you keep going in the elevators and not talking to nobody, going 13 floors up and not even breaking a smile, then you're not going to ever be rich in mind, body, and spirit. So that's what I'm talking about. You have to greet one another when you walk by them. You have to smile at each other. You have to actually send that
get
love,
out of the victim
that vibe.
mentality. That's what we got to do.
I'm with
But
that.
at the same time, there's a lot of hurt people on earth, but we have to, reside in our independence and learn how to think. And like Tupac said, I may not change the world, but I would spark the mind that changed the world. And we are not for sale. And I believe that's what we're doing. As you guys hear this, yabba dabba do, baby.
See,
I like that, man.
and this is what we're talking about with this show. I probably only were able to take in maybe 80% of what Jason said. The other 20% I was fucking lost. But there's somebody that took in 100% of what this nigga said. And that's the beauty of this show.
Please
and somebody
call in.
took in what you said.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of this show. Because when you start talking that Christian talk, I tune the fuck out. But somebody tuned in. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's what we about, people.
I'm gonna keep all you
Independent thought.
motherfuckers prayed up.
I was just finna say Ray had less motherfuckers than MK this week, but
Hey,
thank you,
and
Raymond.
don't get lost in the language, you guys. But actually,
I'm still stuck right here. I want to feel like this nigga over here.
Jason's
You
rich as
understand?
fuck, ain't he?
Hey, he's free.
Hey,
Jason
you
is
talk
free.
about speak to people. This nigga's in great shape.
Oh
nigga.
my God!
I don't think he even take the elevator. He might take the stairs.
I mean,
nigga.
for him to
Ain't
say some of
nobody
the
on
shit,
stairs.
for him to say some of the shit he said, he's rich as fuck.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at him. It's
Let me-
unbelievable.
Let me ask y'all this. At the end of the day,
How long is this show
day,
today, we getting into it
nah,
today.
we good. We good. We can do what we want. It's a podcast,
Straight up.
right? Right?
Straight up.
We
we
can
not
do
for
what we
sale.
want.
We
Keep
not
going.
in one.
You know what I'm
People
saying?
need to hear this shit before they barbecue.
Empowering
If you're in your
ourselves.
car and you got to work and you didn't hear it all, you know what?
Pause.
Turn it back on when you're going home. But check this out. At the end of the day, here's what I want to know. What do we tell Justin? What do we tell his 10-year-old son?
Absolutely.
Because we had a whole lot of talk
That
about
didn't
what
apply
we
to
need
you.
to do.
I'm gonna tell Justin, just like I tell my sons, that I want to be the last generation that's paying Thomas Edison for a light bill. Straight up.
That's a bar.
You guys have the ability to create. Use that to your ability. Forget about education as we know it, as we learned it. Take it to a new level.
And on this specific issue of the 4th of July,
I was just going to say, for those of us who have one eye and not the third eye, what do we tell Justin
Yeah,
about
That the 4th of July wasn't for your people.
Is that what we
Juneteenth was for your people. The 4th of July was not your people.
Well, you
Give
gotta
him
talk
the
to
information.
You gotta talk to his
Give him the
daddy, not his
freedom
uncle.
of thought.
That's what his uncle gonna tell him. What his daddy gonna say? Go ahead, Tusi.
His dad gonna say, "Get your ass in that pool in my backyard."
You know,
We having a barbecue. We shooting off fireworks.
cut the grass.
We should all go to work on the
that
4th.
salt water.
On the real though, in doing my research and reading this thing, and the crazy thing about it is I've known about Juneteenth for a long time because of family in Texas. Because in Texas, the shit is real.
deal.
It's a big deal.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal.
Full of color.
And
full of
for
blacks.
me, it's one of those things where, wow, I really want to start celebrating this more. I want to look at it right next to the 4th of July. Shout out to Apple because it popped up in my phone like as a holiday on my iCalendar. So shout out to Apple for recognizing Juneteenth.
Google didn't know. It's cool.
Oh, well, whatever. I mean, so at the end of the day, we pose that question or you pose that question, what does it mean? What do you go home and tell Justin tonight after listening to this show? And a lot of it has to do with, okay, we want to celebrate Juneteenth. It comes from slavery, but boom, this is what you need to know. And this is how you need to look at slavery and why I want you to celebrate Juneteenth.
It's one of those things where it's gonna basically rewind back into a choice as he gets older. I can. It's one thing like I can enforce it and say this is based on my belief, but at the end of the day, we've all were 10. We've all were forced to believe in something, and that's the reason why we believe in Valentine's Day and Thanksgiving and Christmas,
Santa Claus,
and the Easter Bunny and all these things because we've been forced to believe in them. So it's no telling if he may one day grow up and meet a young lady that is just infatuated with these things, and that then there's love and figuring out does this shit really mean anything to you or what? And I think that's how all these cycles are continue to be repeated.
Yeah. Uncle Ray will tell you the truth. Look, Justin, you're the same age as my son. Devin, if you're listening to this, you will be hearing this. Fellas, hear me and hear me clear, okay? Do not store your riches on this earth. If you guys are working a regular job and they give you a day off, celebrate that day off.
Right.
If you have to work that day, then work hard that day, man. But bottom line is, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. Celebrate every day, as my man Wes would say, and really, really enjoy, man, every opportunity you get to be around your family, any day off you get, because this world is full of cynical things. It's full of lies. It's full of holidays that are very meaningless. But your family, your friends, your loved ones, they're meant to be celebrated. Fellas, if you're hearing this, I love you guys, man. Celebrate every day and every holiday that you get. Tomorrow's not promised.
Josh, can I give you the last word on this to take us out?
Oh, the last word is send it on the curb. It's simple as this. Love yourself enough to be a free thinker. And if you took anything from everybody who said something tonight, I want you guys to really research it and research it more. And I best believe you'll impact the world as you were impacted by this conversation. And I believe that if you have the ability to love yourself first, and you can't love others until you love yourself first. So I just can't reiterate that enough, and continue to spread this knowledge to the people, share this word. And again, we not for sale on